Good morning, everyone. My name is Danielle McNichol, and I'm General Counsel and Director for the Center for Leadership at Neumann University. Thank you for taking the time this morning to discuss with us today interviewing skills and supports. A few brief housekeeping. First and foremost, if you could please put your microphone on mute so that during the presentation, we will not be able to hear any background noise that may occur, just like I'm sure I have right now. Also, you will be receiving a certificate from the Center for Leadership for completion. You have resources available to you, and all of the slides that you see here today will be emailed to you at the email address that you had provided to us. Additional resources are at www.nucenterforleadership.com. Upcoming events that will be webcast on the 14th of April will be social media, and the 17th will be a wellness and yoga practice that will be available free to everyone to participate. We want to particularly thank Pennsylvania Career Link, Donna Tutek, and Krissie Deck for her presentation today. If you would like to ask any questions, feel free to include questions in the Q&A or in the chat section. We will also make sure to answer those questions if if we don't get to them in the presentation. We will do a follow-up with you for any Q&A issues that you may have. At this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Krissie Deck. Krissie is a career development specialist at CareerLink Workforce Development Center at the Delaware County Community College. At this time, Krissie, if you'd like to take it over.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. I'm Krissie, and I am one of the career counselors for the Pennsylvania Career Link, located at Delaware County Community College. And today we're going to talk about interviewing. So I wanted to just go over a few things with you. First is the webinar agenda. So we will go over that in a moment. There we go. Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. So the webinar agenda, what we're going to talk about today is a whole bunch of stuff, but we're going to really focus on interviewing and talk a little bit about interviewing in this period in time as well with COVID-19. So just to go down the agenda, why do we interview? We're going to talk about that. Preparation, types of interviews, skills and abilities, common interview questions, handling a few difficult questions, because I know there's always those difficult questions that stump several of us. How to end your interview is really important, and then the follow-up is super important as well. And then just ending with some questions and hopefully some answers for you. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So the first thing that I want to talk about is, why do we interview? I'm just trying to get the next slide up for you all. So we're going to talk about why do we interview, to learn about the employer and the available job posting. So really what that entails is really doing your research, okay? Being able to look at the employer and take a look and see what their requirements are and the job posting that you're trying to apply to. You really want to match up your skill set at this point. But to learn about the employer and the available job posting is really just as much of an important part as them interviewing you. So you're going to be doing the same thing in regards to looking for the best fit. So you really want to make sure that you do your research in this part. To sell yourself, to sell yourself is really just adding up all of the skills that you have in that particular job posting that you're trying to apply for. So, making sure that you're looking at your strengths, your achievements, your abilities, your knowledge and experience, how much of it you have. This is your showcase. This is something that you want to be able to go in with confidence and be able to sell yourself as much as possible and let the employer know that you are truly the best person for the job. So just to reiterate, you want to learn about the employer and the available job posting by having that interview, and then really selling yourself through that process as well. One of the activities that I like to do when it comes to selling yourself is to take a sheet of paper, and you can do this on your own at home, and divide the paper in half. You want to draw a line down the middle, and then on one side list specific skills, experience, and abilities that the employer is in need of. Then on the other side, write down your qualifications that meet each of those requirements. So you want to make sure that you identify the skill that they are looking for, and then give an example of that skill that you have accomplished. So you want to make sure that you match up as many of the skills that they are looking for with your accomplishments at that time. So that's just a little activity that I like to do with my clients, to be able to be prepared enough to sell yourself. Okay. So going forward to the preparation. Preparation is key. So begin by learning about the organization or corporation and the job posting. So you really want to make sure that you're prepared when you know that you have an interview with a particular company. You want to make sure that you have as much knowledge about the organization as possible. So things to look for, things to research would be the company culture. What is the culture of that company? What is the feel of that company? How many employees do they have? Is it a small company? Is it a larger company? How many departments do they have? What departments work together often? What is the dress code? What is the feel of that office? The responsibilities of the department and the team. So, researching specifically the department that you're going to be working in if you land that job, and who is in that department. So what are the roles involved, and who are the people that are in these roles. So you want to make sure that you have an idea of what responsibilities that department has, and also the responsibility of that department when it comes to the whole organization. So how does that team fit into the full picture, and what is their role? Okay. The next part of that would be values and mission statement. So, normally the values and mission statement are in the about section in their website. And you really want to take a look at that and read up on what their values are. What's their mission when it comes to the company, and make sure that you agree and that your values are, equal to that particular company. And we want to make sure that you really understand what their mission is and be able to speak to that in an interview. The research of the interviewer or the manager would be one of the most important parts of research as well, just because you want to make sure that you know who you're speaking to in an interview. Okay, so you want to make sure that you know that person, where they've worked prior, what groups are they in, and when you look into when you look at them on LinkedIn, what groups do they volunteer for, or what discussion groups are they in LinkedIn? Make sure that you have a connection of some sort with them, or you can make a connection in an interview. That's just a personal touch, but it also can really make you stand out if you've done your research and done your homework on not only the department, not only the company, but also the person that you're going to be interviewing with, and who will be your manager at that point. So where to do all this research? Really, the first part of research is going to the company's website. You can go to the company's website and check out all of the tabs to find out, anything and everything you want to know about that particular company, that particular school. And then going on to LinkedIn as well is going to be a really great resource for you. Professional organizations would help you in a way of chatting with others, other people doing some informational interviewing about that role and that company. Most professional organizations will have more than enough people to talk with about a particular role. And then current employees and your network. So again, networking is so important when it comes to the whole job search in general, but preparation for an interview, talking with your network and talking with people that actually have worked at that company prior, or know someone that has worked at that company, and being able to speak to them is going to be so important as well, just to get their perspective on that company, and get that feeling of whether or not you would be a good fit. So the next part of it would be, the day of the interview. The day of the interview would, I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble with the slides, but the day of the interview would be considering dress code. So, the dress code is a topic that is talked about a lot. I feel like a lot of clients that I speak to ask, well, what's the appropriate dress when it comes to an in-person interview? Well, it just depends on the company's culture and the industry that you're trying to get into. Several industries have their dress codes, and some are formal, some are a little bit more informal. So that's why it's going to be really important when it comes to research, figuring out what's the culture of the company and the industry, and how they go about their day, and figure out what would be the best dress. If all else fails, really, I would err on the side of caution and just dress to impress, and never wear jeans. But you want to make sure that you're speaking to the industry that you're trying to apply for. So consider the dress code when it comes to that. Getting your materials together. So obviously you've sent your resume and you've sent your cover letter to them already, but what you want is really to have copies of your resume when you're going to that interview. You want to have copies of your resume. You want copies of any recommendation letters. If you have a portfolio of some sort where you can display any awards, any works of any of your work in regards to any of that, you want to make sure that you have a portfolio as well. And of course, a notebook to take notes. It is okay to take notes, and just let the interviewer know that you would like to take notes, and if it's okay. So then you can write down a few main points that they talk about, and this will also spark some questions for you to ask at the end. Interview etiquette. You're under a microscope at this point when it comes down to an in-person interview. So, leaving drinks, earbuds, and all essential items at home. Plan to arrive 10 to 15 minutes early. So, a lot of times what I tell people is if it's close enough, maybe do a quick practice run a day or two early just to know where you're going. If you don't know exactly where the building is or you don't know where the facility is at all, you want to make sure that you maybe make a practice run if it's not too far from you a couple days beforehand. But the day of, you want to plan to arrive about 10 minutes early for that particular interview. Be sure to turn off your phone. And I only say that because it's so easy to forget. But you want to make sure that you do that. And then treat everyone in the building the same. So whether it's the person that is out in the parking lot, letting you know where to park, the person that opens the door for you, the receptionist, obviously the interview team or the manager that's interviewing you, treat everyone in the building the same. So those are just some tips for the day of the interview. When we go to the next slide, so Harvard psychologist Amy Cuddy says people judge based on two criteria within seconds of first meeting you. So these are the two criteria. Can I trust this person? And can I respect this person? So really, from the very first time you meet the interview team or the manager who is interviewing you, you are under a microscope and you are being judged. So you want to make sure that you make the best impression possible. Most humans will make a decision in a very quick amount of time, whether they can trust you and whether they can respect you. So it doesn't take long for that to happen. So I just wanted to put that in there just to remind you that you really do need to make a good impression, in the very beginning of that interview, in the first 5 minutes. So we're going to go on to types of interviews at this point. So the first type of interview that we're going to talk about, if we just want to click that one slide, so phone screens, phone or screening. Okay, so types of interviews, there are multiple types. And at this point, because of the situation that we're in regards to staying home and doing some social distancing, there's going to be more phone and more video involved. But I'm going to go over each one of them and just give some tips on each one. So phone or screening interview. So a phone interview has always traditionally been to screen people as, whether they're going on to the next part of the interview process or if they're going to be screened out. So it is technically a screening interview. And it is something that will move you to the next particular step in the interview process. And it is something that is quick most of the time. Now, things might change at this point because of the social distancing and because employers, when they are looking for folks to fill jobs, they might be doing more phone interviews and they might be longer. But traditionally, phone interviews have been a screening tool to see whether or not you're the best candidate to move forward in the interview process. So all I would say about phone interviews is they're going to ask you a couple of questions to get a real feel for whether or not you would be a good fit for their company. And, using a landline, if you have a landline, is always best. But if you don't, make sure that you give one particular phone number for them to reach you on your resume, the one that you're going to be using often. so they can call that particular number. An in-person interview is, of course, something that most people are used to, and that is something that you go into that particular company and you have an in-person interview with the manager who would be in the department that you're going to be in. And that is the traditional way after a phone screening, to be able to get a feel for that first impression like we talked about, and your skills and your abilities. So you want to make sure that you dress to impress, and you are prepared and you've practiced your questions as much as possible, and also bring those materials we talked about. A panel interview is an in-person, most likely it's going to be an in-person interview, but it is a panel of either the department team or a couple of different departments, people from different departments. So, picking a few administrators from different areas in the company, or, having the hiring manager and then 3 of her colleagues. So it's going to be a couple of different people. I've heard it be up to about 5 people, 5 or 6 people in a panel interview. And normally they take turns asking you questions, and you would address that particular person for that interview, and then you would give eye contact to everyone when you answer. So these are a little more difficult because they can be a little more stressful, but this just gives the company a little bit more leverage when it comes to having more people in the room and more people focused on that particular candidate. It gives a feel for whether or not they'd be the best fit. Video interviewing. So video interviewing is going to be more and more popular now, more than ever, because of the social distancing we have. So video interviewing can be anything from Skype to Zoom, and really it's going to be a traditional interview like you would do an in-person interview. The same questions. You need to dress to impress still. You need to make sure that your internet is working. One of the biggest things that I think is difficult for video interviewing is the technology part, and sometimes it's out of our control, but you want to test that before you have the interview, and make sure that things are working well, and that you want to avoid having as many hiccups as possible. You don't want to have too many hiccups. Part of the video interviewing would also be to find a space in your home, or if you have a home office, somewhere that you can quietly work and have that interview with no distractions. And also lighting, believe it or not, lighting with a video interview makes a difference. So you want to make sure that you have good lighting when it comes to that particular type of interview. And like I had mentioned, there's going to be more and more of that going on. Once the economy gets up and running again, there's going to be a lot of interviewing going on, and video interviewing is going to be a huge part of that. Then the last one that I want to talk about is a type of interview, and this can be done over, in person, a panel, or in video, and it's behavioral interviewing. Behavioral interviewing is basically figuring out from your past experiences, your past behaviors, your past examples that you have of your accomplishments, how that's going to predict your future behaviors, attitudes, and how you would handle situations. So you want to be able to speak to examples from your past experience, um, in particular with different skills. So, leadership skills, conflict resolution, attention to detail, being in charge of a big project, being able to express those particular examples and accomplishments in a story-like form. Um, and you'll probably hear in those particular instances where behavioral interviewing is a part of the interview with, tell me about a time when, or can you give me an example of? And those are the behavioral interviewing questions that I'm talking about. So preparing using the STAR method is really popular. There are so many articles and resources about the STAR method, but it's basically situation. So what was the situation that that occurred in your past experience professionally? What was the situation? What was the task that you had? And then what was the action that you took? Okay, so, were you a part of a team, and what was your role in that team? So what was the situation or task? What was the action that you specifically took? And then what was the result? So the result is always, it doesn't always have to be positive, but you want to spin it to a positive if you can, if it didn't turn out quite like you wanted. So, being able to learn from that experience is a good way of spinning it, but you have control. What's good about these behavioral interviewing questions is that you have a lot of the control when it comes to your particular stories. So find stories that really, that you're really passionate about, that you're really proud of, that really make you stand out from the crowd. And, stories always make you stand out more so than anything else. So I think that these behavioral interviewing questions are such a good indication of how you will be in the next opportunity. So the next slide that we're going to talk about is selling your skills and abilities. So, in the very beginning of the PowerPoint, we talked about selling yourself. And, this is such a common conversation that is talked about in the job search world. So selling yourself is so important, and you want to make sure that you stand out, and how you stand out, and how you talk about the different opportunities that you've had in the past are going to make you the best candidate for that particular position. So make sure that you're prepared in advance for questions that they're going to ask you about your accomplishments. So accomplishments, a lot of times these are on your resume. These are really important. Accomplishments are anything that makes you stand out, anything that you are proud of, anything that you've gotten verbal or written recognition for. So accomplishments are really great. It's a really great opportunity to make you stand out. What are your strengths? So, you want to focus on your particular strengths and how they match that particular job. So again, going back to that little activity that I talked about in the very beginning, being able to speak to the job, being able to speak to the skills that they're asking for in the job, and really focusing in on what are your strengths when it comes to what they're asking for. So really tie it into that particular job and tailor it to that as best as possible. So what are your strengths? What are your accomplishments? Any leadership ability. So, anything that made you, take initiative of some sort, or that you built a program with a team of folks, or you took opportunities that were out of your comfort zone and helped you to lead your team or your company to a better result. They always really enjoy leadership conversations, leadership stories, and that's going to make you stand out. Your ability to learn new things. What employers are looking for right now is, that you're a lifelong learner, as well as someone that can be flexible, someone that can be adaptable, and your ability to learn new things on the fly is going to be, something that they are looking for at this particular time. Contribution to the organization you have worked for. So, what was your role in the organizations that you've worked for in the past, and how did you contribute? Did you come in every day and just do your job and keep your head down, or did you contribute to, a particular program, or did you help raise money, or did you do anything to contribute to that organization, and what did you do? So you want to make sure that you let them know that you not only have contributed in the past to other organizations that you've worked for, but you would like to do that again with this company. Problem-solving abilities. So problem-solving is always going to be one of the number one skills that anybody in looking for a job should have. So problem-solving is going to be something they're going to look for, and they're going to ask you questions about how you've solved a problem in the past, or did you have a particularly difficult problem, and what was the result of the actions that you took? So again, going back to the behavioral interviewing questions, they're going to ask you a lot about problem solving. Ability to work with others. So of course, working individually on tasks and responsibilities is important, but being a part of a team and being able to work well with others is so important. And it's part of your soft skills. So, a lot of these to consider: your accomplishments, strengths, leadership abilities, how you contributed, problem solving, all of that is going to be part of your soft skills, as well as giving concrete, hard examples of how you've done it in the past. That's really going to be important. So just when you're selling yourself, when you're selling your skills and abilities, make sure that you really brainstorm about these particular skills and abilities, and then how they match up with the job that you're trying to apply for. So the next slide is, some common interview questions. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a few common interview questions, and I just wanted to, read the question to you and have you take a few seconds to think about how you would answer these in your words. So the first question would be, tell me about yourself. So that's one of the most popular questions that you are going to hear from an interview. And it's most likely going to be one of the first questions that they ask you as well. So I just wanted you to take a moment. I'm going to pause and think about how you would answer that. Okay, so with the tell me about yourself question, you're really going to focus on that 30-second elevator speech that is talked about, that elevator speech that we all hear about in articles and conversations and different things like that. But that 30-second elevator speech is really summarizing who you are, what you do, why you are the best person for this particular job. And then being able to know your audience when you're answering this question. So know the people that you're speaking to, and then to know yourself. So the interviewer really wants to know if, why you're an excellent fit for this job. Okay. So really focus in on your skills, your abilities, the passion that you have for that particular industry, and talk about that. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be, one word answer. It just has to be enough to make them want to ask you more questions. So telling just a little bit about yourself, and focusing in on that elevator pitch that we all know and love. So the next question I'm going to also read and then just give you a moment to maybe think about it. Describe a difficult work situation from your past and explain how you overcame it. So, describing a difficult work situation from your past and explaining how you overcame it, this comes into play with the behavioral interviewing questions that we talked about. So, really using that STAR method is going to be important in this particular prepping process that you have. So, really talking about a situation or a task that you had. What was the action that you took? And then what was the result of that? How did you overcome that particular difficult work situation in some way? You want to make sure that you respond with, a positive outlook. And if it was something that you learned from, you want to make sure that you mention that, you've learned from the situation, and you've been able to have a similar situation happen, after that, and you were able to, approach it in a different way. So making sure that the employer knows that, you have difficult work situations, but you've overcome it and you've learned from it. So the next question would be, why should we hire you? And that's one that's going to be really popular as well. So when they ask you, why should we hire you? I'm going to give you a second to think about that. So why should we hire you? You want to make sure that you focus on why you're the best person for the job. You want to be prepared to explain why you're the person that should be hired and why. Display confidence. You want to focus. You want to make sure that you're um, detailing a lot of the skills that they are looking for in particular. So, focusing in on the skills and abilities of the job posting and your particular skills and abilities and how they would match up and why, they should hire you above anyone else. If there is a particular problem or a situation that they are in need of handling, if you've gotten that opportunity in the interview to talk a little bit about why they're really, looking for a particular person for that role, you can speak to that. You can speak to, well, I understand that you have this particular problem, or you're having trouble with handling this type of, database, or this particular, team problem, and I'm the person that will be able to fill that role and accomplish what you need to get accomplished. So make sure that you make it known that you are the best person for the job and why. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how to handle more difficult interview questions. And, we always get these. They're a way to kind of put us back into stress mode a little bit. And, but if we're prepared for them, if you've practiced what your answer will be, you're less likely to stumble and less likely to get too stressed when having these questions thrown at you. So one of the questions that always seems to be cringeworthy is, what are your salary expectations? And salary is a very sensitive subject when it comes to looking for a new job, as well as being in an interview where something is asked with salary. So I understand that it is a little bit uncomfortable. But when they ask you what are your salary expectations, the hiring manager really wants to know what you expect to earn. So you want to answer, you want to be careful when answering this type of question, because you don't want to, go too high, because that might knock you out of the running, but you don't want to undersell yourself as well. So what I would say is always give a range is the best answer for that. And you can do a lot of research, going back to that research end of things from the beginning of our presentation. You can always research salary and salary in that specific type of role for your area. And you can do that via Career One Stop, as well as salary.com. You can go on to Glassdoor and take a look and see salary, salary information as well. But you want to make sure that you have a range in mind, and you never want to, you never want to go on the lower end, because then you'll get shortchanged, but you don't want to, go extremely high either, because they might have a range in mind as well. So, I think if you answer in a way of having a particular range that you are comfortable with, that you are able to live off of and feel confident with your skill set and your experience, and how that, will equal out, that is really what you want to think about when that question comes up. So the next question is, what are your goals for the future? So what are your goals for the future? So this is a very loaded question. It's something that you really do want to prepare in advance. What are your expectations for being, if you are hired in this company? What are your expectations, or where do you see yourself in 5 years? That's another example of this type of question. And you want to think about designing this question to find out what you're going to, are you going to be able to stick around? The employer wants to know, are you going to stick around, or are you going to move on pretty quickly? That's one of the number one reasons why they ask this question. So are you going to, stay for a year and move on, or are you going to stick around, and where do you see yourself going in the company? Focusing on the job and the company, and reiterate to the interviewer that, your skills and abilities align with the long-term goals that, that they see, really will put you in a good light when it comes to this particular interview question. The next one is, why did you leave your last job? So, this can be a difficult question because you could have left your last job for personal reasons, medical reasons. You could have gotten laid off. Perhaps, you were fired. There's multiple reasons why you leave a job. And so, what I would say to that is, make sure you just keep it positive and keep it honest. Focus on your strengths and the growth that you made in the company previous to this, and really be honest when it comes to why you've left the last job. And you don't need to go into too much detail. So really keeping it brief and making sure that you keep it on the positive end. So make sure that you don't, bash the company that you were at for a particular time. Make sure that you keep focusing on your strengths and how you grew from that company. And, that will be the best way to answer that particular question. The next question is to please explain why there's a gap in your employment history. So again, this could be, for multiple reasons, a layoff, or you've gotten let go, or you had a medical issue that you were recovering from. So again, keeping it positive, keeping it honest, keeping it short and brief, um, and then focusing in on your strengths is going to be key. You also want to emphasize activities that you have had since that gap. So if you had a gap in employment, you want to make sure that you talk about what you've done in that time period, and where has your time been focused? Have you been taking online classes, or are you getting a degree, or have you been volunteering somewhere? Anything on those lines. You want to account for the time that you have in that gap, but you also will mention that in your cover letter, hopefully. So you want to make sure that you've mentioned a gap in your cover letter, and then when speaking about it in an interview, you will talk a little bit more about the activities and the skills that you've developed in that time period, in that gap. And again, you don't want to, obviously you don't want to trash talk any of your employers, and you want to be as honest as possible. Going over questions you might want to ask them. So whenever someone asks if you have any questions for them, you always want to say yes. You really want to make sure that you've prepared enough questions so that you have a few questions at the end. If they ask you in the middle of the interview, if you have any questions, you want to make sure that you have enough for, that particular time. That's why it's always good to ask to take notes. If there's something that you wanted to ask about, you could ask about that here. But you always want to have questions, and never want to say, no, I'm good, I don't have any questions, because that does not look great, and it also makes the interviewer feel like you aren't invested. So asking a few questions is always really important. You never want to ask questions that convey what's in it for me. So you don't want to ask about benefits. You don't want to ask about the salary. You don't want to ask about the the packages and the perks of the particular job. You want to ask concrete questions that are going to put you in the forefront of the candidate pool. So making sure that you pay attention to what they're talking about throughout the interview, and then being able to come up with a few questions right then and there, or to have some prepared is my suggestion. So a couple of questions that are fairly popular would be, how will my responsibilities and performance be measured, and by whom? What does a typical day look like in this role? And then what do you like about working for this organization? And I put that at the end because I think that that's really important to ask the either the panel, ask the manager that is that is in the interview, or the people that are going to be your team members. If it's a panel interview, what do you like about working for this organization? They always really enjoy having the opportunity to let you know why they like their job and why they stick around and why they want to be there. So it just really kind of gives an opportunity for them to speak a little bit about their passion, but it also gives you the indication of, okay, they really enjoy it here. It's a great culture, the great team to work with, and you get a little bit of insight into their world. So ending your interview, you want to allow the interviewer to end the interview. So you never want to say, okay, thank you very much. You want to make sure that they are the ones that close that particular interview. Be sure to reinstate your strengths, experience, and the reasons why you can be an asset to the organization. So make sure that you just reiterate that you are truly the best person for this position and why. What are some of those particular strengths that you want to focus on? Ask the employer when they intend to make a decision. So that could be one of the questions that you ask at the very end of the process. So asking the employer, when are they intending on making a decision? When, do you have any other interviews coming up? And then you can be, have a feeling of what the time limit is going to be. Offer to make yourself available for future correspondence. So if they have any other additional questions for you, make sure that you are readily available for any other questions they have to seal the deal. And then shake hands and thank the interviewer as well as the receptionist that is in place at the office. So making a good impression on everyone that you come in contact with is super, super important. Interview follow-up. So the interview follow-up would be just as important as the actual interview. Okay, so you want to make sure that you send a thank you note as soon as you can. So I would say that day, after the interview is done, make sure that you send a thank you note. There are a lot of conversations about what kind of thank you note. Should it be an email? Should it be handwritten? You can also do both. So it's really going to be up to you, but my personal preference is I usually send a quick email saying thank you, and then I follow up with a handwritten thank you note to each of the each of the people that I spoke with. So you want to make sure that you get each of the person's names and titles and, you know, all of that information in order to send a personal thank you note to each and every person. You want to make sure that you know, do that in a quick turnaround time. So you want to have that interview and then, you know, either that day or the day after, send the thank you note as soon as possible. I think the handwritten thank you note just is a great personal touch. You can have an email sent to them as well. But I think that the thank you note for the handwritten thank you note is such a personal touch, and it makes them remember you more than just an email. And then follow up, have a follow-up email expressing your interest, you know, 2 weeks after the interview. So, you know, 2 weeks after the interview or whenever they said that they would be making a decision, you want to base it off of that particular answer that they have. But generally 2 weeks after an interview, you can follow up with another email, just, you know, stating your interest and thanking them again for their time a couple weeks ago and that you're really interested in the position. So at this time, if you have any questions that I can answer, I'd be happy to do that. I hope that this was helpful. While I'm reading the questions, I just wanted to give you some resources. So there's a lot of resources for interviewing and that talk about all sorts of interview questions, all types of interviews, how to practice interviewing. But these are some resources that I really like: the careeronestop.org, balancecareers.com, the Muse. PA Career Link, the website has a particular section called Learn About Online Services. If you click on that and then you click on interviewing practice, there is a service called Big Interview, and it's free if you enroll in the Career Link system. It's called the Big Interview, and it's a great resource for practicing your interviewing skills. So be sure to check some of those resources out. So it looks like there are no questions. So I'm going to turn it back over.
Thank you very much, Krissie, for this very informative discussion about this. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to email us at the Center for Leadership and to avail yourself of the resources on both the PA Career Link and the Neumann Center for Leadership website. Once again, thanks so much to our partners at Career Link and their expertise in this area. Be safe, everyone, and have a great day.